We welcome you to the August 2025 Nonprofit Success Lab, where we have our friend, and really she mentors a lot of us, uh, Connie Miller. She has her own consulting service called Credible Advantage. She is an author. She is the former Icon CEO. She has a background in lots and lots of stuff, but one of the things that she excels at is leadership development as well as financial development. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Connie. Both Brian and I will be watching the chat. So if you have questions, just put them in there, and then we'll let Connie know. With that, Connie, take it away.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. This is one of my favorite topics is have in my entire career have served on many, many boards, and I've seen where sometimes the board can be the most instrumental in either causing challenges in an organization, but also providing the strategic direction and seeing nonprofits really thrive. So this is the most important group of any nonprofit, our board of directors. And I have found that many times we go out and we find the most amazing board member and we recruit them to our board, but then either our meetings aren't effective, or sometimes they just become boring. And I have sat in some of those board meetings where it's, just so routine and we're not really talking about the most important things that we should be talking about. So I've had the opportunity in my whole career to report to either show up as a CFO in board meetings. Every organization I've ever worked for has had volunteer boards, either early in my career with Girl Scouts or later, even in the credit union industry, they're all volunteer boards. I've also had the opportunity to be on the other side of it, which is I have been a board member and or served on about 20 board committees and boards, but I've also been board chair a few times. So I've also had this beautiful opportunity to lead a board as a volunteer. So some of these are just things that I saw that worked for me that really elevated the board experience as well as the effectiveness of the board. So I'm going to share some of those with you. The first thing is we want to stay very focused, and this is the board chair role, but the executive director is also very important in this, is to stay focused that our board meetings, we want to create meetings that our board members don't want to miss. In other words, they have to have a lot of fun. They have to have some flexibility. What happens often is that we let the agenda control our board meetings in a sense of we forget that there's more than the words on the paper that show up on an agenda. So a big mistake we make is that we make them too routine and too rigid. So one of the really important things is that we strategize, and I always encourage get input from your board in regards to what they would love to see in a meeting, but also have the board chair and the executive director get together and really strategize. How do we inject some energy and creativity and connection to each other in our board meetings? So one thing that's really important is to make sure that our board members know each other. There is this concept of shared fate, which is we want us all to be working together to share the fate of our organization. It's very difficult to do if you don't have a bond and you don't even know each other. You don't lean in and help each other when you don't have that. So one of the things that's really important, and sometimes I'll see boards where they may have served together for a couple years, but they really couldn't tell you much about the other board members. And so some fun icebreakers are really good. I loved Minute to Win It exercises. You can Google this. There's hundreds of opportunities to do just really fun 5-minute things, which add a little bit of fun and laughter. And it can be anything from tossing ping pong balls in a solo cup, or picking up rice with chopsticks, or it's just this fun little competitions that take a minute or two that really add a lot of fun. There's also icebreakers, get to know each other, everything from what's your favorite animal to what is, one thing people don't know about you. So these are just some ideas of ways we can inject a lot of energy and creativity in our meetings and build the shared faith. That's what we're trying to do. And one of the really important things here is to always go in with some celebration and some shout outs. So between board meetings, there's always some really amazing stuff that some board members are doing. Maybe a board member connected a potential donor and they went and had a coffee visit with a potential donor, and you had some success from that. Those are the types of things that you want to make sure you're doing some nice shout outs, and the shout outs can be dispersed throughout your meeting. They all don't have to all happen at the beginning. In other words, if your development committee is doing a report out on donor cultivation, the shout out can happen when they have that particular agenda item. But it's just important that we do this. I'm also going to give you some tips later on ways you can fulfill your board and help teach them and have them learn board as a board member about themselves, learn about organizations, because the other thing I found that was super helpful is if you can give them something they can also take back and use in their personal life, it's time well spent sitting in that board meeting as well. So we just sometimes we get too focused that it's just all about this organization in this 60 minutes that we have together. But there's a lot of wonderful ways that you can kind of build this energy and have meetings that people really want to attend. So the first thing and I hear all the time when I talk to executive directors and I'll say, what's the biggest pain point in your role as an executive director? And oftentimes they will say, my board's not engaged. I need to increase the board engagement. When I talk to board chairs and I say, what are things you wish that your board could improve on? Oftentimes they say we have not, sometimes it's not all, sometimes it's just some board members that aren't engaged. They're not attending the meetings. They're not showing up at your fundraising events. They're not responding to emails when you ask them even the simplest emails, such as, a lunch order. And so some wonderful ideas to get board members engaged in the meeting. Here are some things that you can do. The very first thing is that the board chair needs to be what I call a curious leader. Board chairs are there to manage the meeting and keep the meeting flowing. But it is important that they aren't just a report out role. In other words, their job is actually to pull from all the people in the meeting. And depending on your board, when I have seen one board, I've only seen one board. Every board is very different. You usually have some of those folks that are very conversational, willing to speak up every time. And then you have some others that aren't quite sure that their input is valid, or maybe they're newer to the board, not quite comfortable speaking up. So one way to have some beautiful engagement in your meetings is to have the board chair ask for thoughts from every board member. Practically, what I like to do here, because typically board members come in and they sit in the same seat, is I like to randomly pick a spot in the room and I change it up as a board chair. So I might start with the person to my left in one agenda topic, and then I might pick someone in the middle to start and just go clockwise to make sure you include everyone. So a really good practice is just to say, I'd love to hear the thoughts from everybody. And these don't have to be big, profound ideas. You just want to hear, like, what are you thinking about this? What are things that we should be thinking? What are things we haven't talked about? How are you just feeling? How does this feel to you? If you preface that conversation, then usually you'll get every board member to share something. And it is amazing how the quiet ones will have some pretty amazing insight as well. So that's one way to get board engagement, is to pause and go around the room, start with a different person each time, and ask for thoughts. And it can be anything. And then the second thing is during the meeting is randomly call on board members for input. It keeps board members on their toes because they know they could be called upon at any point in time, but call on ones that are kind of more appropriate, such as if it's a finance question, you might call on the board treasurer and say, hey, can we get your input on this piece? So if you create a safe culture, and this is important, this isn't to publicly shame or humiliate them if they don't have the answer. It is just to say, hey, what thoughts do you have if if you have any? The third one, and this is critical, is quality board orientation. So if you don't have a good orientation program or an onboarding program when you recruit a new board member, I recommend that you build one and you put all board members through it, and then you test it and you keep adding to it from there. So a quality board orientation would look something like this. You would take your board packet and you would think about what questions would be appropriate for a board member to ask if they were looking at this report. And so that would be the first thing. Circle a few things in your board packet. And in board onboarding, when you say the types of questions that would be really appropriate are, if you saw that our budget to actual was more than 10% out of balance, or if you saw a real a trend going on in our donor cultivation, or maybe when you looked at our audit and you saw records of action or recommendations or findings, it would be really appropriate for you to ask some explanations, as a little bit more background to those. So the first thing is, I find when you can go through a board packet and train a new board member on the types of things they should be looking for, that would be great. This is a perfect time where you also share the things that aren't really appropriate, such as if they saw that office supply expense went up a little, it wouldn't be appropriate for them to ask all the details of who your office supply vendors are and get in the trenches, basically, too much detail. So it's a good opportunity to share. And what you're doing is you're teaching them what's appropriate engagement and what's not in the board meetings. So you build out your board orientation. And one of the ways you do that is just to send a survey to all your board members and say, what would you love to know more? Or what do you wish you knew when you became a board member? And then you look at all those responses, and then you make sure you've got some training in your board orientation. I have found that about a 3-hour board orientation is usually what it takes to do a full board orientation. And I've also found that it works really well if you can have the executive director and the board chair be the two people as part of that board orientation. And you just get in a rhythm. You just have your little agenda and you go through things. And new board members love it because now they know more about your organization. It gives you the safe one-on-one time with a very small group to say, what questions do you have? And then you listen during this time about, you're just going to get to know them better, how they think, what they think are potential opportunities. And then that gives you this safe environment to say, yeah, that would be the type of thing that really wouldn't be appropriate, but that would be the perfect thing. We're going to really value your input here. So board orientation is critical, and I make it formal. There is a process that you go through every time you have an onboarding. You do the background check if that's what your organization does. And then the next step is you schedule board orientation. And oftentimes the thing you don't want to do is have the new board member show up at a board meeting and never have had orientation, because they're sitting there, they'll be intimidated, they won't know exactly what their role is, and they will often misstep if you don't do this. And now you've got to have a little bit of correctness and or mentoring or coaching going on. The
Connie.
other engagement idea, and this is critical if you only meet quarterly or less often than that. Monthly, it's not as critical, but I have found that you will build the shared fate when you do that. And this is create activities between board meetings to build relationships. And so an example would be, hey, throw out an email and say, hey, we're inviting all board members. This is completely optional. Spouses are included. we're going to go to a Boise Hawks baseball game on this day. And so if you want tickets, here's the link. So these activities between board meetings don't have to be fully well planned, paid for by the nonprofit events. They can just be opportunities for board members to get together. What works really well is if you can get a board member to volunteer to host, like a cocktail hour or a visiting hour at your home for an hour or two after work some night. Those are great, even meeting in a restaurant. Just make sure you can hear each other if you meet in a public setting. But just create like one fun activity between every board meeting. And again, they're always volunteer, but you will find board members really appreciate, and spouses often appreciate meeting other board members because they're going to hear and that will also engage them to support the cause. So I do think these are really important, and we have to remember that spouses are part of the picture, significant others are part of the picture with this, and oftentimes are a connection to donor cultivation as well. So the more you can kind of build this unity, the better.
Hey, Connie, Connie,
Uh-huh.
there's a question, and I
Excellent.
think it's a really important question to ask. What if the board chair and the executive director is the same person?
Okay. That is fine. They just carry the dual role. What I do recommend when that's the case is have the executive director slash board chair recruit another board member to help with this. And executive committee is often the best second choice there. So if you are one in the same, then you can also just include maybe your board treasurer and your secretary, maybe your vice president, and that you kind of tag team this together. So that is just fine. And many small organizations, especially smaller nonprofits, have that type of a setup and relationship. So that's just fine. You can also even get creative here and say, okay, we'd love a kind of a social connection relationship committee on our board. Who would love to chair that? And sometimes you'll have a board member that's just what they love to do. So they can come up with ideas and send them out. The important part here is that you don't set the tone, they're mandatory, because a person didn't sign up to attend social events between board meetings unless you have that as a criteria. And then, so that's the thing, right? We want to make it as voluntary and as easy as possible. We don't want to add a whole lot more load to the executive director's busy schedule.
Connie, the other question that has come in is what is a typical new board orientation packet include?
I typically like all board policies. I like the most recent board packet. I like the most recent audit so that you can talk about the types of things that are important for you as a nonprofit. And then a board roster with contact as well as position titles. A beautiful thing is if you can have board profile, like a little information, a paragraph or two about each board member. That works out really nice as well. And then terms. We love terminology that is industry specific, and we forget that that person might not know what our acronyms are. So a page that includes all of your acronyms and what they mean is really important. And then financial, anything that you have to explain the financial piece, because we have to remember not everyone are accountants. So they might not know when you say P&L what that means. So financial piece of it. And then, of course, the front page of it all is your mission, vision, why you exist as a nonprofit. That's your lead in is here's our purpose. Here's why we are. And the board packet will usually give them enough information about the details like membership trends and financials and all of that. So those are my recommendations in a board orientation.
So Connie, the other thing that we like to include is the bylaws.
Oh, yes, yes, obvious, yeah, yeah. Sorry, I forgot that one. That one's critical. Bylaws, and I actually go through the bylaws in orientation, not line for line, but definitely the most important ones, which are how board members, are elected. Every organization, they're elected a little differently, what the terms are, how you have your annual meeting. You want to cover some of the, so you just go through your bylaws and hit the top ones. Yeah, thank you, Blossom. That's actually the most critical in the whole packet is the bylaws. Any other questions? Okay, and then engagement, the other engagement idea is to have the board members deliver committee reports. So oftentimes, depending on how large you are, you will have board committees. So you may have a finance committee, you may have a development and fundraising committee, you may have a marketing committee, you may have a nominating committee, which are those that look for potential new board members. Those are just samples of committees you have. One mistake that we make a lot of times is we either have the executive director report all the committee, or we have sometimes the board chair. So one way to build engagement is to have your committee chairs, the board liaison for those committees, do the report. So you'll have the report in your board packet, and they'll just add some commentary to it and deliver the report. And then the committee chair then wants to make sure that their committee members, if there's more than one board member serving, but also asking for input all the time. Any questions, any input is really, really important so that we're not just reporting out in board meetings. So those are some engagement ideas that work really well.
The
Yeah.
question I have about those board reports, specifically
Mhm.
committee reports, is do you ever use the consent agenda to do the committee report so that it doesn't just, a lot of times committee reports can drag down the meeting.
Yes.
And
So
so, yeah.
yeah, I'll talk about a consent agenda a little bit later because consent agenda is a powerful tool to get you time to talk strategically and find engagement and all of those. So I'll talk to that a little bit, but on the surface, what I would say is important is if you have a committee standard membership report, for example, that goes in every board packet, and it's part of your consent agenda, which means it's included in a group of reports that you vote on as a whole and approve as a whole. If you have that, then what I recommend, which is just fine, is that when you have your new business and all of those, make sure your committee chairs are the ones leading those discussion if it impacts their committee. Okay, so for example, if there was a major financial decision that needed to be made and you're approving your standard financial reports in your consent agenda, then that's fine. And then later, if you have a particular finance thing, then it's your finance committee chair on the board that would lead that discussion. But it doesn't mean that the executive director doesn't have a lot of input, because usually they've been tasked to go research a bunch of things. That's fine. You just want the conversation to be led by a board member. Okay. And then I'll talk about appropriate how to use consent agendas in regards to if you have an exception to one of those reports in a minute. Any other questions?
Maggie has one.
Okay.
Do you recommend to immediately recruit new board members to a board committee to get them more engaged?
Yes, I love the concept if you are large enough. Some organizations are just trying to get board members. Okay. So, but I love the concept of recruiting people to committees to see how they communicate, see how they show up, see how engaged they are. And the other thing is when you start on a committee and then you move on to the board, you're just more experienced to serve as a board member because you learn a lot by being on a committee. The other thing is a lot of people they don't have the capacity to join your board, but they have incredible expertise that is valuable on a committee. So in your board recruitment, oftentimes you can pull someone in to a committee, still gain incredible value from their expertise, but maybe they don't have the capacity to serve in a board role. They can just stay a committee member. So that's the other thing to kind of pay attention to. So yeah, I love flowing potential board members through committees first. When possible, it just gives you an opportunity to, I guess, try them out is the easiest way. See how they fit, Are they engaged? Are they willing to share their expertise? All of those things as well. Excellent question, Maggie. Okay, so education ideas. This is where probably of everything I'm going to talk about today that we miss the boat and we go really, really weak on generally in boards. So what we have to do is look at board members the same as staff in regards to we still have an obligation to continually educate along the way. There is changes in our world, whether it's technology or maybe we're in a mental health nonprofit. And maybe there is new things that are happening in that world that we need to understand as board members. And so always having an education component on your board agenda, in my opinion, is critical. It is the one thing board members won't want to miss if you spend a little bit of quality time and make sure that this is well done. And so my recommendation on education ideas are randomly throw in some board governance. So board governance can be, let's hit these 3 things in our bylaws. And let's just make sure everyone is reminded of these. Because one thing we do is we think if we tell board members something once, they're going to remember it forever. But you have to remember their board service, I always say their board service is their 4th job. They have their career job if they're working outside the home. They have their family. They have all of their activities and hobbies. And the 4th one is this volunteer role they serve. So it is really important to remember that we have to constantly be educating board members. They don't come to the board meetings every single day. So they will often forget what we have helped educate and train them on. So we need to get in this habit of constantly making sure we're providing value back to our board members. One of the things that I've learned over the years is if you give them something they can use in their job or their life, they are more likely to be engaged in your board. So I have seen where we've done a variety of things like professional development. We might have had, like we did a session one time on just how to think strategically, how to overcome your personal biases, all kinds of things. So randomly throwing in some board governance segments. This could be a 1 or 2 minute reminder or education about how we address certain things. Robert's rules, some random things around Robert's rules is a nice little education component. And then board policies. So I recommend that you look at all your board policies. You add them up. If you have 5 board policies, then you put a board policy in your board packet if you meet monthly every other month. And you redline all the changes because when you review a board policy, it's amazing how there is always a change recommended, such as the title of the controller is now CFO, or there's just a wide variety of things that change. So keeping your board policies up to date when you review them annually, board members love the reminder about, oh yeah, we have this investment policy. And you will often find when you review board policies that something happened where you were kind of out of policy and forgot. And so it's just a great gentle reminder. And then on the professional development side, finding people, and I don't recommend more than 10 to 15 minutes on this education component because it's definitely going to extend your board meetings a little bit. But you can bring little excerpts, you can bring little videos. I love bringing real life people in, even though it might only be for 10 or 15 minutes, to talk about a wide variety of things that might be helpful for what you're working on as your nonprofit. So for example, I always hear we could do better with board giving, building a culture of board philanthropic efforts. So bring in a fun little way to go ask, have a little coffee meeting and ask people for money. Just bring in an expert that knows how to kind of share with the board how you go about doing these things. Sometimes we have to bring crucial conversation training because it's very difficult when you bring a whole bunch of volunteers together. And so then sometimes we have those unfortunate situations. They don't know if it's appropriate to bring this up in a meeting or not. And so you have the parking lot discussion, which causes challenges. So just bring in a good little 10 or 15 minute thing on crucial conversations, risk management topics. So If you are a fairly new board, I recommend that you make sure you're allowing a half-hour education time. If you are a ongoing, stable, you're functioning, what you would call high functioning, 15 minutes of education time is probably good. But you can all choose, and hopefully you're picking topics that people don't want to miss and that they can take it back and use it in their own job. I remember when we did the Strengths Finder training, how powerful it was for our board members to also use it in their own job or with their spouse. So those are examples. So add some fun education ideas. They can be on dry topics such as bylaws, but you can still just kind of make them fun, and they're just great reminders. And you'll be amazed how many board members will say, oh, I forgot about that, or I didn't know that, even though you went through it in board orientation. So we have to remember we need to be telling people 5 or 6 times all the time. We just always need to be referring back to bylaws when we're making decisions, referring back to board policies, but also bringing some of these things out. Any questions about just the ideas around education? Uh,
Connie,
uh-huh.
Connie, one of the things that we try to do in our board meetings is actually bring the nonprofits that we're working with into the boardroom with kind of a profile of who they are and what they're doing. Because if we don't keep a face on who our end user is, it's really easy to make decisions that are based on our own experience versus the experience of our clients.
Yes. And I always recommend we start board meetings off with a good mission moment. So executive directors can watch for that email that comes in based on someone they've helped or a particular little video but a mission moment of why you exist. Like, who have you helped that month that actually shared something, and listening for those stories, because that builds this shared fate. And volunteer board members give a lot of the time, they give a lot of their time. And so to get them connected to why they're sitting in this, what can be seen sometimes as a monotonous board meeting, when they also have 3 other things going on at work that they're leaving, it is important that we connect them to the mission. Sharing great stories of things is super helpful. I agree. And then again, adding all of these trainings, technology, how do we use AI right now? AI should be a topic in every board meeting. How do we use it? What are opportunities where we can tap into it? And then what is the belief system around it? Like we have to openly talk about these things. Okay, so this is what I typically see in a typical board agenda. There's usually a call to order, there's approval of minutes. Then we have our reports, which is our financial. Sometimes the executive director will give a what's happened over the last month report. And then we'll have committee reports. And so some of these are just like different things like such as development. Maybe the development person's given an update on where our donations are with corporate giving or whatever. And then we usually have follow-up from any old business that we've talked about in the past that we needed to bring back and continue the discussion. Usually we'll have some new business, and then we adjourned. That's a typical board agenda. So what I'm going to challenge you all to do is to think bigger than this in regards to that. So there is a lot of words on this page, and I'm not going to go through them all, but I wanted to at least give you this material so that you have it to refer back to. So this webinar is being recorded, and you will have it for the future. And I'm happy to get slides to anyone. So this is what I like to see. Definitely the call to order, then a mission moment, some 1 minute reading of a letter, reading of an email, showing a video at the event you had, just something, some mission moment connecting people. Then I like to ask if there's any additions to the agenda. The reason I like this is it prevents people throwing stuff in throughout the whole meeting that they want to make sure you talk about, so that you know right up front, we actually have 2 more things, additions to the agenda. Then that is a board chair responsibility to manage that, whatever it is, if it's appropriate to add to this meeting, because it also helps set the expectations about what is going to be discussed in this meeting. And also it just helps you just thinking about time management as well. So I like to ask for that one. And then approval of the previous minutes. It's critical. You're always approving the minutes that were given to the board of the last board meeting. Then we have action items. I like that the board chair leads that conversation. Here are the top 3 things we need to make sure we take action on today. Then you have your report outs. I love a little bit of time about strategic discussion. If there's one question that you ask there every time, it's what should we be talking about? What's the most important thing we should be talking about today for the future of our organization? If you just ask that consistently, you will get a little bit of strategic thinking going on. Anything around risk management and compliance, if you have, so I like to say, is there anything that could take our organization down today that we need to be talking about? Is there any big risk that has recently happened that we should be aware of? That's when you might hear something about a cybersecurity attack or a particular something that showed up in an audit, internal control risk, insurance risk could come up in this. Then I'm a big believer to put executive session on every agenda, but it is only if needed. And every board handles an executive session differently. So what executive session is that you will all agree who your either executive committee, sometimes executive committees take this role, or it is an opportunity where you go into executive session. Typically, the executive director is excluded from this conversation. And it is an opportunity for you to have a very confidential conversation. You just can't take any action when you're in executive session. Then I'm a big believer, bring the ED back in. You can put this at the right before adjournment. You can do a wide variety of things with executive session. But I am a believer that you do it regularly so that when you do have to call one, it doesn't cause the executive director to get all nervous. Like, oh God, oh my gosh, what's going on? The board called for an executive session. So it's a routine thing. And oftentimes you're like, yeah, we don't have anything. Does anyone have anything? No. Okay, this is good. And then that other business. And then the fourth one is just this whole education, guest presentations, anything, and then you adjourn. So you can see we're adding quite a bit here. So let's talk about how we manage some of these, because most board members are scheduled for 1 to 2 hours. So we're going to talk about allotting the amount of time you need to have an effective board meeting. One of the handicaps that boards place on themselves is the time of their meeting. So it is a really good thing to have a good open discussion about, does our time that we've allotted for board meetings serve us well? And if you consistently find that the handicap is the time of the length of time that you have your board meetings, then there is a bigger discussion, and this is a whole board discussion. Should we really start meeting for 2 hours instead of 1? And for some boards, it might even be longer than that. So I get asked to come in and do board strategic planning sessions all the time. And it's fascinating when I say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your ultimate goal from this strategic planning session? I'll open that up. They'll give me their long list of what they want to accomplish, which is a 3 to 5 year plan and all this. And I'll say, okay, how much time has your board allotted? And they'll say 1 or 2 hours. And it's not even achievable. So it is very important you're having this open discussion about the same thing with the board meetings. I'll hear all the time, well, we can't do that because we'll run out of time. So don't let the length of your board meetings, do not let that become your handicap. If you have to increase the time or meet more often, know that you should always be saying that's an option. Okay, so mission moment. What I love about mission moments, these are just ideas for you. I'll just leave those for you to read, but just share something that ties to who you serve. That's the most important thing in mission moment. The second thing is the addition for agenda items. So these are just some reasons why you want to open that up. It does need to be managed by the chair of the board. And you will decide, okay, yeah, we do need to talk about that, but today that's going to be in the parking lot. That's what you want to do with that one. And then you can determine future agenda items in this discussion. You can do all kinds of things with addition to agenda. The important part is that the board member has something top of mind. They need to get it out, and they need to get it out in the board meeting, not with another board member after the board meeting. That is the best way you can have an effective board. So if we don't allow time to even ask, then oftentimes it doesn't happen. The action items, these are the most important things we discussed today. So here's what I see happen a lot of time in board meetings. You go through all your reports, which are just your standard reports, and board members have a few questions, and all of a sudden you only have 10 minutes left for the items that are the most important thing we need to discuss today. So they'll either push them to another board meeting, or they'll try to do some email communication afterwards. So when you push this a little bit up on your board agendas, then you are at least tackling the most important things that you need to discuss today. Time management by a board chair is important, but you don't want to shut down amazing, crucial, strategic discussions when they are the most important thing you're talking about. So this is just something, a good opportunity to increase the effectiveness in board meetings. Strategic discussion, I'll just leave these. I put these in here so you would have them as a resource, but these are questions you should be asking yourself to elevate your board to be strategic. I do believe how do we be more strategic as boards is a board training topic that you should add to your list, because board members sometimes can be strong doers and you can just keep doing things, but you don't even know, you don't have a goal. I recently visited with an organization that's got a big gala coming up. And I said, what is your goal? What's your financial goal? And they couldn't answer it. What is the purpose of this big gala? They hadn't had the why discussion. So they're spinning their wheels. So that's an example when you have these strategic discussions. So you'll have all of this as a resource to refer back to. But these are some great questions you can ask to increase strategic thinking skills.
Connie,
Risk.
there is a question that I think
Okay.
you want to tackle. Have you received feedback from organizations who have longer board meetings? Long board meetings might scare some volunteers away. That's from Bryce.
Yes. So what I would say is if you are recruiting a board member and they're going to make a decision whether they want to join your board based on a 2-hour meeting versus a 1-hour meeting, they probably aren't a good potential board candidate. Okay, so put them on a committee if you want, or tap into their expertise another way. So if you sense that the person their bandwidth is too tight and they don't have the time to give the board what it needs to be successful, they are likely not going to be the best board member. It doesn't mean they aren't incredible at what they do and would be incredibly valuable to you, but it's not going to serve you well. It will be a challenge down the road. Yep, good question. And I do hear that, by the way, sometimes. And I'll even hear it with existing board. So one way with existing board is to say, here's what our organization needs to do to thrive. And we have some tough things and we have big challenges. We need this from you. Can everyone do this? And is our time right? Do we need to change the day of the week? Do we need, in other words, you're getting creative about when you can do this. But existing board members, if you have them where they're digging their heels in and they're saying, I can only give you 1 hour, it is okay. It doesn't make them a bad person. It is okay to start strategizing how you find people that can give you the time. And then maybe there's a committee they can serve on, or they're just an advisory person you tap into on occasion. That is okay. Okay, so risk management, here's some questions. Always be asking, what's our greatest risk? What could hurt us? What could surprise us tomorrow? These are things like bad PR, cyber, attack, all kinds of things can hurt you. So just always be talking about risk management and just at least a brief discussion. Anything happened in the last week that is elevated our level of risk? That's a good question you can ask. And then you could or since the last board meeting. And then the one thing that we forget in risk management is we should always be working on succession planning. And succession planning at the board level, as well as the paid staff. So occasionally you just need to really have these are we elevating board members so they're ready to step onto the executive committee when we need them to? Is the executive director cross-training and building succession planning within your own organization? That's risk management. And then exec session, again, you don't need to go in exec session every time. I do like it if you do, but it just depends. Every organization's different. But the most important thing is just keep the executive director safe in this. If you only have one of these a year and there's tenseness going on, it's going to really make them uneasy. So your job is to treat these as just normal, everyday conversations and part of what you should be doing as a board. All right, and then the other things. So you want to add the fun little other things. And I actually schedule time in. If you have a guest coming, the last thing you want to do is say, oh gosh, we ran out of time. Sorry, we don't need you, right? But there is occasionally some of these things, but if it's on the agenda and the board member is looking forward to that conversation or topic, then you need to find a way to still work it in if your conversation gets a little bit off track. All right, and then we just talked about this a little, but every board should be having this discussion, which is, are we allowing sufficient time to do the work of the board in our meetings? And then also planning sessions. It is really tough to do a planning session in 3 or 4 hours. You really need 8 hours. 7 maybe we can do, but to really have good discussions about your strengths and your weaknesses and all of the different avenues you can take your organization, you really need a full day planning session. So you just take board input and said, would you be willing to give up a Saturday if we had to? If they all say no, is everyone willing to give up a day at work for those that work outside the home? So it's important that you do not be handicapped to the amount of time you're allowing for your board meetings.
Connie, another question came in that I think is hypercritical to effective board meetings. And it's from Patricia Walker. Any other recommendations to prevent the board meeting after the meeting?
Okay, yes. So first of all, I will just offer this. I have some incredible training on how to build accountability and trust and communication, getting the real topics discussed in the meeting. In board orientation, you hit this hard, which is all conversations must occur in the board meeting unless they are at the committee level that will come to the board. All board issues must flow through the board chair. So the board chair should never be caught off guard that a board member is upset or confused about something. In other words, make sure it goes through the board chair. The other thing is the board chair and the executive director must meet regularly to make sure that you are keenly aware of what's going on out there, that you're both sharing. So have an agreement that there will be no surprises from either part. So for example, if I saw that a question was asked in a board meeting by a board member and I could sense something was there, but we didn't get to the heart of it, because by the way, when board members ask questions, almost always it's rooted in fear. Some fear. It's fear of unknown. It's fear of lack of control. It's fear of decisions that the executive director is making. It's rooted in fear. The best skill set an executive director can have is go into active listening mode and be inquisitive when a board member asks a question. The worst thing we can do as an executive director is be defensive. The worst thing, because then what happens is board members do not want to bring the things up in the board meeting because they know they're just going to get defensiveness. But a board chair can control that conversation and guide it and say, okay, yeah, I think this is really important. Let's hear, like, what's your biggest concern, and pull from the board why they're asking that. But I am a big believer that you establish a board policy that is no pairing, which means we don't pair off and talk about another board member, about an important topic. We bring everything to the board meeting. So no parking lot conversations. It is destructive to boards, by the way. It's painful to boards, and it causes distrust and breaks down accountability in teams. It's the same thing in the work environment, right? But it's just critically important. We also have that in the board meeting. So we talk about real issues. I've got some training. We've done some webinars, so you can go back and look at the recorded webinars on the Nonprofit Success Lab on increasing accountability and trust with teams. There's some really good stuff in there. If your whole board watches that you will benefit from. Yeah, great question. Okay, so we talked about consent agenda a little bit. So I do recommend consent agendas, which are all those reports that you get every single packet. I am a big believer to put them all in one motion to approve as a consent agenda. The way you do this effectively is you ask, before you ask for a motion to approve, is there anything in any of these reports we want to pull off the consent agenda for a separate discussion? And then if say there's one thing on the financials you want to ask a question about, then you say, yes, I want to pull the profit and loss statement off. And so then you pull that out of the consent agenda, you approve everything else, and now we discuss that one item. That's how you do consent agendas. This will save you a lot of time. The important part here is that you all are committed to reading these reports before you make a motion to approve them. So it doesn't work well when you haven't reviewed the financials and you've been leaning on the only time you review the financials in the middle of a board meeting. So good board governance is in orientation to make sure your board members show up having read the full board packet. What does that require? It requires you to get them the packet with enough days in advance they can work it into their busy schedules. So I'm a big believer, 4 days minimum. I like 5 or 6, but it is important. But you can ask your board, are you getting your board packet in enough time to review it before the board meeting? And just ask them. They'll tell you, I really needed a couple days earlier. And then if that makes it super tight on the staff to get, because it takes a while to get the books closed and all the reports done, then you as a board need to agree to shift your board meetings 1 or 2 days later in the month. You can do that too. So there's lots of options there. So always be listening for the obstacles. So that's consent agenda. Use it to free time up for your important strategic discussions. Okay, this is just a template for you to have. These are a great, whenever you put an item on the agenda, if you can train people before they present, executive directors love this. What's the purpose? Why am I bringing it to you? What do I need from the board today? We're not going to solve it all. Just this is only what I need from you today. Here's what I've done so far. Open it up for discussion and then what next? It's just a great template for you to use. I've actually seen boards put this template on for their agendas, and they actually try to go through this. So I'm just giving this to you so you have it. You can use it in the future for what you want. And then finally, meeting evaluations. So we don't take enough time to evaluate, was this meeting worth our time and effective? So this is one that one of my boards I served on, we did this. We had this and we started off, and the red was our beginning when we started. The blue was later. And our goal was just to continue improving. And so we would ask the board these questions, and they would rate on a scale of 1 to 5. Every board meeting, we had an evaluation at the end. They would just circle their little things, add some comments, and it would go to the board chair. And the board chair knew, could they improve in managing the meeting? All of those things. So you'll just have these questions for your reference. So you've been great at asking some questions along the way. Is there any other questions that you might have? Okay. So next month I'm going, okay, so there's some really good stuff in this, the stomping out drama in life and in the workplace. There's some really good tips in here for really good communication in the boardroom. So we'll touch on some of these things that we mentioned about either side conversations or people, board members that want to play the persecutor role, or they're just always rescuing other board members. There's all kinds of things we're going to talk about in this one. So that's super fun. So put that on your calendar. And then Blossom, you want to speak a little bit to the consulting services that Idle Partners for Good has?
You bet. So Connie is one of our many consultants. We have over 30 different consultants that come under our umbrella to help us do double the good. So if you use our consultants, then it helps to fund the pro bono work that we do, like the Nonprofit Success Lab. So we highly encourage those that use consulting or who know of others that need consulting to get a hold of us. And we're happy to sit down for a free discovery call and help you do more of what you do best. So we really focus our attention in leadership and business development, operations, strategy, I think specific things like that. But we do workshops left and right. And so if you need something on listening, active listening, if you need something on strengths finders, emotional intelligence, we have all of those things available for you. Before we go to the next slide, though, I want to let you all know we just completed a listening sessions with philanthropic foundations that fund Idaho nonprofits. Everything from small foundations like the Idaho Women's Charitable Trust Foundation, up to the JCAF, the J.A. and Catherine Albertson Foundation, and then even bigger to the Murdoch Foundation. And they gave us some really good insight on how they're thinking about this moment in time and funding. So we're going to host a seminar with the foundation sector in a couple of weeks, and then we'll do one for the nonprofit sector. So if you're interested in that, let us know, and we'll make sure that you get the invitation.
Excellent. Yeah. I always say if you go talk to those, right, they'll give you amazing insight. So listening sessions are something Idle Partners for Good does an incredible job with. And we get a lot of insight from it because of that. So thank you, Blossom. That's my contact. You may text me, you may email me if you have a particular situation where you want some advice on. Like I said, when you've seen one board, you've only seen one board. So every board is unique and different. Every organization is unique and different. But usually these are 5-10 minute conversations. I'm happy to help you if you've just got one little obstacle you're trying to work through and solve. You can reach out anytime to Blossom or myself if your organization needs some assistance. And I just want to thank you for investing in your organizations. Showing up for things like this makes your board stronger. It helps you build a good board if you're just starting to build one from scratch. It helps you get off on the right foot. And so thanks for just continuing to invest in your own leadership and for what you do. For our executive directors, we know how you have to multitask, and we know that role. For volunteer board members, we know you are busy people with lots of things pulling your time. So I just want to say thank you for investing in our nonprofits. Okay, any final comments?
Can we have the deck emailed to us?
Certainly, we can. Yeah, just watch for something. Idle Partners for Good will be pushing this out on their website, so you'll have the recording. And just email me if you need to. Happy to get you the deck as well. And then
Perfect.
Yeah, we don't generally send the whole deck out to everybody, but yeah, that would be perfect for you to, yeah, like Connie said, more articulately than I.
All right, love the comments. Thank you all.